The streets of Renaissance cities offer a fascinating window into the everyday sensory experiences of people living between the 14th and 17th centuries, especially when it comes to what they smelled like. Contrary to any romanticized notions of clean, fragrant lanes filled solely with the aroma of fresh bread and flowers, the reality was far more complex and at times quite challenging to the nose. Understanding what the Renaissance city smelled like requires examining the intricate blend of its sanitation practices, the presence of animals, the influx of spices and exotic goods, and the widespread use of perfumes. Each of these elements contributed to the olfactory landscape in distinctive ways, illuminating both the urban environment and the social and economic conditions of the period. Cities in Renaissance Europe, such as Florence, Venice, London, and Paris, were bustling hubs of trade, culture, and population growth. However, sanitation infrastructure was still rudimentary at best. Unlike modern sewer systems, most cities relied on a combination of cesspits, open gutters, and the simple practice of throwing waste onto the street or into nearby waterways. Historical records indicate that waste was a constant presence on city streets. Human excrement and household garbage often blended with rainwater in open channels running along the middle or sides of roads. These open gutters, known as rills in Florence or kennels in London, were intended to manage wastewater but frequently contributed more to the stench than to cleanliness. This was particularly evident during the warm summer months when the smell of decomposing waste intensified markedly. Animal presence in Renaissance city streets further affected the odors experienced by inhabitants. Unlike modern city life, animals such as horses, pigs, chickens, and dogs were common sights. Horses were essential for transportation and freight and were often stabled near or on the streets themselves. The manure from these animals, combined with leftover feed and the animals' own bodies, added another layer of organic matter contributing to the smell. Pigs were sometimes allowed to roam the streets to scavenge for food waste, and chickens wandered freely, adding their own natural odors to the mix. This proximity to animals was a practical necessity for urban inhabitants, especially given the limited resources for waste disposal and the demand for affordable animal protein. Yet it meant that the scent of manure, both human and animal, was a constant ambient presence. Despite many of these less than pleasant odors, Renaissance cities were also an aroma crossroads due to flourishing trade routes that brought in spices and other fragrant goods from faraway lands. The period's increasing global connectivity, propelled by explorers and merchants, introduced Europeans to an array of new aromatic substances previously unavailable or rare. Spices such as cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, pepper, and ginger became highly prized not just for their culinary uses, but also for their perceived medicinal and even spiritual properties. Wealthier urban residents and merchants often displayed their status by using these imported spices liberally, both in food and in household applications. Spices were frequently ground into powders, used in perfumed oils, and even mixed into waters to freshen the air indoors. For ordinary city dwellers, the scent of exotic spices might have mingled with the pervasive odor of the streets, offering occasional fragrant highlights amid less agreeable smells. The popularity of perfumes and scented products also helped shape the olfactory environment of Renaissance cities. Influenced by both medieval traditions and new Renaissance interests in personal grooming and hygiene, the use of perfumes saw a substantial increase during this time. Historical inventories and personal letters reveal that citizens from various social strata purchased and applied scented waters, floral sachets, and pomanders. Small containers holding fragrant substances such as ambergris, musk, or powdered herbs to mask unpleasant smells or simply to enhance their personal appeal. These perfumes were often expensive, with recipes carefully guarded by apothecaries and perfumers who catered to the upper classes. Yet evidence shows that less costly versions existed and were used by those of modest means to help combat the daily odors encountered in taverns, markets, and the urban streets themselves. The markets themselves formed another important olfactory hub within Renaissance cities. Marketplaces, where shops sold bread, cheese, fish, meat, vegetables, and spices, were alive with sensory activity. One chronicler from 16th century Venice described market stalls laden with the sharp, salty tang of cut fish, the yeasty odor of freshly baked bread, and the pungent scent of garlic and herbs. Fishmongers often cleaned their wares in the open air, leaving behind a lingering marine smell that mixed with the smell of blood and raw meat from butchers nearby. Cheese and dairy products carried their own distinctive aromas, which could range from sweet and mild to strong and pungent, depending on type and age. The close quarters of market stalls, combined with narrow streets, amplified these odors, creating a dense olfactory tapestry that could be both stimulating and overpowering. An interesting counterbalance to the strong and sometimes unpleasant street odors was the cultivation of herbs and flowers in and around city homes and cloisters, which often included rosemary, lavender, thyme, and roses. These plants were not only useful for cooking and medicine, but were valued for their fragrance. Herbal gardens provided a welcome respite from the harsher smells outside, and their scents also played a role in personal hygiene methods employed at the time, which did not yet include regular bathing as it is known today. Instead, linen changes, scented handkerchiefs, and sweat-absorbing powders containing herbs were used to promote cleanliness and freshness. It is also worth noting that cultural perceptions of smell during the Renaissance were quite different from today's standards. Contemporary medical theory, heavily influenced by the humorism of ancient Greek and Roman texts, rediscovered and studied during this period, associated odors with health and temperament. Certain smells were thought to influence or indicate bodily humors like blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Consequently, people often tried to regulate their odors to maintain health or social propriety. Bad odors were sometimes viewed as signs of disease or moral failing, which explains the efforts of city dwellers to mask and manage the smells around them, even when the underlying causes could not be easily removed. In summary, Renaissance city streets carried a complex and layered blend of scents that reflected the realities of urban life, trade, and culture. The smellscape combined the unavoidable odors of human and animal waste, the rich smells of local and imported food and spices, and the efforts of residents to counteract unpleasantness with perfumes and fragrant herbs. This olfactory mixture defines the day-to-day environment of Renaissance urban centers and reveals much about the intersections of economy, society, and health in this transformative historical era. The next dimensions of Renaissance urban experience emerge as we consider the development of public health reforms and changing attitudes towards sanitation in the centuries following this period. As cities grew and sought new ways to contend with the challenges their smells posed.